to our next panel on mobility. And this is really interesting because this relates directly to day-to-day life in India, elsewhere in Asia, and across the global south. We're going to be looking at mobility in developing countries. And we've got a panel who are going to come on stage now, who are all of them in their way experts at this particular topic. We have Mr. Rohit Gothi, who's the CEO of Hero Cycles, very well-known firm here. We will have Ms. Nandini Maheshwari, who's head of business development at Uber in India. And as you know, Uber have a partnership with the World Sustainable Development Summit. We'll have Mr. Sudipta Mukherjee, who's vice president and plant head of Haldia Energy Limited. Mr. Sunil Mathur, who's a member tourism catering of the Railway Board. And Mr. Manu Saxena, vice president business planning of TVS Motor Company, another of India's leading mobility companies. And to chair this little lot, we have Dr. Sumantran, who's chairman of Celeris Technologies. So I shall now hand over to the chair for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's getting towards the tail end of a very long day and a very informative day, I hope. But I can only say that for this session, we've assembled a truly remarkable panel. It's a bit of a variation of the Noah's Ark theme. We don't have two of every kind, but we have one of every kind. So we've got somebody from bicycles, we've got people from the two-wheeler industry, we've got cars and mobility services, we've got railways, and we've got energy. So what more could you ask? We've filled the spectrum with the panelists that you have. I know through these last couple of days, there's been a tremendous amount of very valuable discussion about the kind of transformations underway with mobility around the world. Certainly, we just finished writing a book on this for over 4 years, and we begin to see the whole world more or less approaching the cusp at which it seems adoption is around the corner. When you hear a person as prominent as Akio Toyoda, chairman of Toyota Motor Corporation, saying, change is upon us, and it's not a matter of how we do well in this new environment, but how we survive in this environment, you know people are taking this seriously. There are many drivers to the kind of changes that we're seeing in mobility. First of all, urbanization. We just heard a brief mention about the consequences of the kind of urbanization we're seeing in India. You know, we think of India as a mostly agricultural country, but the rate at which urbanization is happening in India is truly astounding. The environment, I think we're all waking up to the consequences of things like air quality, carbon emissions, and so on, and I think there is growing acceptance of the fact that we've got to do something about this as a society. Consumer habits. The digitized world has prompted remarkable changes in the way consumers use technology and how, therefore, they imagine mobility that they would like to use in this environment. And of course, this is with the tech enablers, products, connectivity solutions, telecommunication possibilities, and so on. Now, by and large, the bulk of deep understanding of transformational mobility has focused, perhaps understandably, in the urban environment. The world is increasingly urbanized. We're 53% urban, and very likely will be a situation by 2050 where 4 out of every 6 inhabitants of the world will be urban. So there is perhaps an understandable reason for emphasis on urban, particularly the economic aspect. Well over 3/4 of global GDP emerges out of urban areas. But when you look at the theme for this session, challenges that we will face in the developing world, how do we address this mobility transformation in the developing world? I think some of the boundary conditions of the problem have changed. There is this old adage about the way energy intensity evolves. In fact, energy intensity of an economy actually starts to get worse before it gets better. So all of this congestion and the chaos that we see, it's scary to believe or imagine that things will get worse before they get better. And therefore, we've got to find very creative solutions, creative policies, and creative trajectories to get out of where we are. We have a very critical constraint with affordability. We are a nation with a very large population, and mobility has to be a right. And if we have to deal with mobility services as a basic human right, we've got to address this challenge of making mobility affordable. We have financial constraints. Investment availabilities are limited, and we've got to find the ways to make our rupee or dollar go much farther. But there are some positives to take away. You know, we've not dug ourselves into as deep a hole as many of the Western countries have done. We're not yet such a motorized economy that we can't find an easier change of trajectory. And indeed, you know, when they say small is beautiful, by and large, our economy has, or at least our lifestyle, causes us to have a smaller carbon footprint on the planet, and hopefully we can, from this starting point, evolve to a more effective trajectory. So there are these positives. I think we're going to have a wonderful discussion with all of these panelists here, and we will have ample time for Q&A, both interactions among the participants as well as with the audience. So I will now invite each of the panelists, one at a time, to share their opening remarks before we go into Q&A. So, sticking to the Noah's Ark theme, I'll start with the smallest. So, Rohit, I'm going to come to you. Heroes famous in India for bicycles, but we're beginning to see, even at a time when India has kind of slowly given up bicycles, to see a possibility of a future where bicycles and perhaps e-bikes make a very prominent role in mobility. So, I'll turn it to you for your comments.
Can I use the...
Please.
So, thank you. I was more interested to see the poll results of the poll which happened just now, where the audience was asked whether they would be able to, where they will cycle to work if the environment is safe. I can't see that. I'm assuming the result will be 100%. A very good evening to each one of you. It's quite insightful to hear all the experts gathered, and it's an honor to represent Hero Cycles. Most of you know, Hero Cycles has been in this country since 1956. And we started with a very simple problem of trying to solve the problem of commuting of the average Indian. And since then, we have evolved into the world's largest bicycle manufacturer. We have recently launched e-bikes in the country. And cycles in this country over the last 10 years have grown at a rate of paltry 2% if you look at the CAGR of 10 years. Whereas cars or automobiles or two-wheelers have grown virtually at a growth rate of 10%. India, and this is true for most of the developing countries, has their own unique challenges. What I call it is a bicycle to business class economy, where we want the business class to be cheaper and the bicycles to be digitally connected. And how do you solve these interesting paradigms of a country like India is the most challenging task which I do while I lead a company called Hero Cycles. TERI, who is hosting this particular event, we partnered with them a few months back because everybody knows the benefits of cycling, but we said, can we quantify the benefits of cycling? And we partnered with TERI as a cycle body. And some very staggering results came out. I just wanted to take 1 minute to share what TERI has to present to us. They conducted a formal study, and based on various modeling and assumptions, the figure which came to, with the assumption that 50% of only short commute, which is what we call as micro-mobility, less than 3 kilometers, if fossil fuel shift happens, 50% of what is there in the country, to bicycles, the savings in this country would be close to 1.8 trillion rupees. Even as the largest manufacturer of bicycles, we were not aware of this number. Very loosely translated, it means 1.6% of Indian GDP can be saved if cycle becomes the preferred mode of what we call as micromobility. The three key benefits which TERI was able to quantify was improved health, personal fuel saving, and travel time savings. Needless to mention, there were many more indirect benefits which all of us know, but those were not quantified because there was no modeling available around the globe to put it into a context of rupees into rupees. I mean, some of those benefits we know: emission reduction, energy security, reduced inequality, and many more such so. We know many cities around the globe who are trying to change the mobility landscape, wherein NMT gets more share of space. And some of these initiatives don't need huge capex. They only leverage the existing infrastructure which is present in the city. I'm sure most of you, during the course of last 2 days, if you heard this example, take it as a repeat from me, would have seen a simple initiative of converting a car lane in Taiwan, Taipei, to a cycle lane. What the government did there was, one simple day they said, can we have a parallel lane, which was a car lane converted into a cycle lane? And very soon, the cycle lane actually was moving much faster than the car lane. And then the same experiment was expanded, and it did not need a single rupee of extra investment. All of you know examples of China, what they have done of converting actually motorcycle lanes into e-bikes and into bike lanes. We have a company in UK, Hero Cycle Services has a subsidiary called Everset. And over the last 24 months, we witnessed a very, very interesting phenomena. We realized that there's a spurt in what they call as folders, which is the folded e-bikes. And we're wondering why the hell this is happening. And a simple congestion tax by the local London municipal body changed the behavior of the people there, where they were taking their four-wheelers up to the outer limits of the city, parking the car there, and then taking these folders out, or the folding bikes out of their cars out, and then going to the office. So these are some of the examples of the initiatives that the government can really do. I sincerely believe it's very, very important to change this virtuous cycle of lack of investment in NMT, because if you don't invest in NMT, it obviously leads to what we talk about, unsafe cycling and walking conditions. And as the conditions become unsafe, it leads to lack of demand, and then it's a virtuous cycle which happens around the globe. We were discussing just before we came here that it's still, for India, it's not too late. Our ownership of cars is projected to be 35 out of 1,000 households in next 10 years. 70 to 80% of India is still to be built for 2030. So there can be, and there will be, a lot of urban planning which can happen, which will take care of and gives prominence to NMT, which will take care of what I'm talking about. 3 government initiatives already are in place. There is National Urban Transport Policy, there is a Smart City Directive, and there is a Sustainable Habitat Mission. I, over the last few years, have been going through these beautifully written documents, and I sincerely believe that if we can have one single owner of these 3 initiatives in these smart cities, all the issue of NMT can be merged into one, and there could be a long-term solution. I just like to end with a simple quote of the ex-transport commissioner of New York City, Janet Sadiq Khan, and I picked this quote from a TERI presentation. And she says, and she has been one of those drivers of really putting NMT into New York, and she made a very simple statement. It's not about space or engineering. The real battle is about the culture. And I think that's what holds true for our country also. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohit. We'll next have Manu Saxena talk to us. He's the VP of Business Planning at TVS Motors. So he's going to give the two-wheeler or the motorized two-wheeler perspective to the subject. Manu, it's all yours.
Sure. I think I'll follow Rohit and use the podium initially. I would say Rohit did present a great picture of how a city infrastructure can kind of flourish if each stakeholder is kind of brought together, and the role of each modal transport is kind of clarified, and all of us stick to that role in a little long-term way. And that is what probably I will also try to emphasize upon. I'd start with the point on mobility actually is a driver of progress for a human being, especially in countries like the emerging markets, where mobility is more a need, a purpose rather than an entertainment. This is the place where two-wheelers kind of fill in the gap for lack of public infrastructure, lack of public transport availability. And this is kind of a recurring cycle because in a city which attracts people for providing for opportunities, kind of is unable to keep up on pace on the public infrastructure. More and more people come in, there's more congestion, and we have to rely on various transport modes to kind of give opportunities. Two-wheeler, in my opinion, provides that opportunity for people who are living in that space. Affordability is another dimension which is significant. If you keep in mind the people who kind of migrate out migrate from the other cities into the cities, big cities, which are the epicenters of urbanization. And keeping that in mind, and the 2 points in mind of public infrastructure not being there, two-wheeler being the affordable solutions, it is very difficult that we will see in next 10 years a city which is having a lesser proportion of two-wheelers. In India, it is very unlikely that we'd see something like that. What any form of mobility today has a side effect. One, as I mentioned, is congestion. The second one is that it creates pollution. These solutions that we are looking at today are keeping both these things, in isolation. When we look at pollution, we are trying to make the options available which are sustainable, but we forget that the core purpose of the vehicles are mobility at an affordable price. So if we don't see this whole thing in a one big optimum, we will not come up with a solution which is sustainable and long-term. I think in the AMP documents, which is the Automotive Mission Plan, released in conjugation with the SIM and MORTH and other ministries, as well as in the white paper which SIM released last year in 2017 December, both kind of emphasize that how we should look at the entire ecosystem in one continuum and define the role of each one of the modes in a particular way. Of course, urban planning plays an important portion in this. However, urban planning is a much larger spectrum. I would come to that a little later. If you look at the transport options available, public transport and the shared mobility solutions and two-wheelers become the three important drivers of change to move into technologies which are sustainable technologies. Now, government actions and policy help on one side, and technology initiatives from the OEMs on the other side, a combination of that would certainly help this progress very, very fast. Just to give some statistics, and probably that's the only way to show. So Rohit, of course, forms the biggest portion. The numbers that Rohit can talk about are massive in terms of bicycles. But in two-wheelers across the world is about 70 million two-wheelers are sold every year. India sells in India about 23 million. So that's the size of two-wheelers which are sold in India. That's the number of people who buy two-wheelers every year. And 50% of that are consumed in just 600 cities. So that's the kind of need gap that we are talking about in mobility, which a two-wheeler suffices today. If we take focal areas and places like Delhi, places like top 6 metro cities, and then look at those getting converted through electrification of public transport, two-wheeler, shared mobility in this order. That probably would be a very good glide map. However, it's a journey which is a 10 to 15-year journey, and we will need to be committed, remain committed to this over those 15 years without much policy deviations. It will need support initially from various fronts, and it will need concerted effort, commitment from OEMs, commitment from policymakers, commitment from all stakeholders. And I'm pretty sure that we will discuss amongst the panel roles of each one of these modes and kind of detail that out during the session, and would love to hear your thoughts after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. Moving up the size scale, we next have, speaking of vehicles, we next have Nandini Maheshwari, who is the head of business development for Uber India. So she's going to address the viewpoint of cars and maybe more, and certainly shared mobility.
Great, thank you everyone. It's delighted to be a part of this esteemed panel, and I'm sure there's been a lot of interesting discussion that's gone in the last 2 days about the problems we're dealing with. So let me start with that. I'll divide it into 4 parts. First is just the ever-increasing cars. We know we're not there at the levels of the Western world, but still, we've moved really fast. We have added more cars in India in the last decade than what we added in the 5 years after independence. Clearly, our cities are not built to accommodate that many cars. The second part is the loss due to congestion. There was a recent study by IIT Madras that said 60,000 crores are going to be lost every year, even just in Delhi, and it's growing. That's a huge amount of productivity loss because of congestion. Third is parking. Parking, we don't even consider it, but it's a huge opportunity cost for parking. We know that there is 10 to 20% of the city space is being used for parking that we might not actually need in the years to come as people reduce the amount of cars that they buy. And the last thing is public transit. We know that public transit is a great option, but it doesn't reach home. That's one of the reasons why people want to buy cars, they want to use their cars, and they're looking for mobility options that can complement it. So given all of these problems, we know that's where Uber came in, and Uber has helped solve a lot of these issues by using technology to increase the asset utilization of a car. Just to reiterate, our vision and our mission is to reduce private car usage by providing reliable options to move from point A to point B. Now let's talk a little bit about the private car usage. We did a recent study with BCG where we have seen that a traditional car, that if we ask people around whether they would give up their private car if they got enough reliable options. Over 80% of people have surveyed have said that they will not buy their own car. However, we also heard them around what do we need to do to for people to get to ditch their car. And what we heard again and again is we need multimodal. We need more options, more sustainable options, and more reliable options. And that's where, as we move forward, although we have built a great technology platform that's serving millions and millions of rides every day, we know that the future lies in multimodal, and that's where we are investing our efforts. And that's where we've heard our co-panelists talk about how we need to improve our culture and even go towards like the two-wheeler segments. That's where a lot of the India is running today. Now, within the multi-mobility space, what does it even mean? It actually solves 2 parts. First part, it improves access. Today, an Uber car is an air-conditioned car. It is only serving a certain strata of the society. I know there are a lot of Uber headlines every day, but if you really think about it, we're only serving 1% or even less than 1% of the urban transportation segment. There's a huge opportunity out there for different mobility options to improve access that are more affordable, more sustainable across different population segments. The second thing it does is it gives you a better combination of options. So for instance, at some points, to go from Delhi to Gurgaon, your car, if you go in an Uber car, it might be an hour, but actually if you take a short last mile connectivity to the metro with an Uber Moto and then take the public transit, a metro, that could actually be shorter. And that's where we believe that we want to play a huge role. We want to make sure that anybody who's moving from point A to point B has all of that options available in our application and can really compare those options and actually solve the fundamental problems I spoke about initially. We are, in this regard, we already have Uber Moto and Uber Auto available in 9 to 10 cities, and we are working with many other governments to actually make it available, because we have heard a lot of great feedback on those options. And while on your way out, you can also see a study on Uber Moto and what customers are saying to get more insights. And the last thing, just to conclude, I know we're running out of time, is as we talk about multimodal, the next vision that actually is important is not just having everything within one application for you to compare and pick what's best for you. What's equally important is you should have an ability to pay and seamlessly book and really make this experience so easy that people don't even think about using their car and then actually ditch the car. We know it's an amazing vision, but it's been really hard to do. And that's where very, very few cities in the world have been able to do it. We at Uber are really committed and are working hard towards really living this vision. We are already in touch with many authorities and are going to really, really invest a lot of time and effort into it. So just in closing, I think we are very committed towards a vision of multimodal transport, making sure that we provide all modes and all forms of transport, and we are available and reachable to as many people as possible, and especially in the world we live in. Thank you.
And so staying with the theme of moving up the scale of size, in India it doesn't ever get any bigger than Indian Railways. So we have Mr. Sunil Mathur, who is an additional member on the Railway Board, to give us the perspective of rails.
Thank you very much for the opportunity for being here today. When we talk of mobility in developing countries and we talk of sustainability in the future, in the context of India, I don't think it's possible to talk of the country without talking about Indian Railways. And we have our network spreads across the country. It's the third largest railway system in the world. It's got 67,000 kilometers of route kilometers. It's got more than 8,000 stations. We run 23,000 trains a day, which is about 9,000 freight and 13.5 or 14,000 passenger, including suburban trains. We have 2.5 crore, 2.4 crore passengers originating every day, boarding a train every day. We load 3 million tons of freight traffic. I'm sorry I'm boring you with some data, but then when you get a railway officer on with a mic, he can't help talking about the size of Indian Railways. We have the economy. We feel that the economy is so heavily dependent on us. For example, we are still a country which produces thermal energy. It's coal-based. We run something like 65 to 70% of the coal is transported through the Indian Railways. Cement about 55%, steel about 75 to 80%, raw materials to steel plant about 90-95% is all transported by rail. So and of course I always like to mention that we do it 24/7, and we've been doing it for 165 years. Now, as we know, transportation is the foundation of the modern economy. It's important for India's growth, the country's growth, any country's growth. Everyone in India, I don't think there is a single person who can say he has not been associated with Indian Railways at any stage, because whether it's education or school or a family wedding or a business or whatever it is, I think all of us in some ways and our families have always been associated with Indian Railways. Being so big also places some responsibility on us, which we realize. And we realize that we also have to contribute towards sustainability, and we can't just be working in isolation. So the Indian Railways sometime back established a directorate called the Environment and Housekeeping Management. And in fact, as I understand, it's the only ministry in the department to have a directorate for the environment and housekeeping. We understand the challenges. We have made an assessment of what we need to do. We have plans for the future in the sense that We are now looking at 100% electrification of all our major routes by 2021-22. Over the decades, we have lost a lot of traffic which has gone to road, partly because we haven't been able to build up our capacity proportionately, and partly because the road network has increased. So in the 50s, we used to transport something like 80% of all freight traffic. We are now down to 30%. What we are doing is infrastructure development has got a big push, and our capital expenditure this year is going to be the highest ever. We are building the dedicated freight corridors. We are doubling our congested routes. We are providing additional lines wherever they are needed. We are augmenting our rolling stock, and the whole purpose being that we should be able to move up again from 32 or 33% of freight traffic to say around 40-45%, because we are environmental friendly, and of course we are looking at it as a business opportunity. Other than that, very briefly, the railways has also gone into solar energy, wind power. We are experimenting with biodiesels and blends of diesel, so that dependent on fossil fuels comes down. We are using CNG in our workshops. We are experimenting with solar panels on our coaches. We are doing different kinds of energy generation, so that dependence on oil comes down. We are also doing some things which people don't know about, and even we don't know about sometimes, because these are peripheral to our main work, which is transport. We are increasing the forest cover in the country. For example, we've set targets for 5 crore trees to be planted alongside the tracks. We are doing water management, recycling. We are converting, all our stations have got 100% LED lighting. And as you also know, we were the first government agency or any agency which went into IT in a big way, because the passenger reservation system was inaugurated or started off sometime in the late 80s. And now all ticketing and everything is now possible to be done online or on your mobile phone and everything, so you don't need a physical ticket and paper and so on and so forth. So we understand our responsibilities. We've been working towards them. The whole issue, I think, now boils down to how do we get traffic to come to rail, which is more sustainable than road, and that is something which somehow we have to work out a solution, who's going to coordinate all this. And as I was joking with Nandini just before this session began, that the people on the panel probably have totally opposing views. Nandini's view may be that she doesn't want public transport to come up because the Uber's business plan might fail. But anyway, we have open to discussion, and I just thought I'll just bring some of the things which the Indian Railways is doing towards sustainability in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker in this session will be Mr. Sudipta Mukherjee, who is Vice President and Plant Head at Haldia. Obviously, particularly in an electrified environment for mobility, we're going to need a lot of energy and power. So, Sudipta.
Good afternoon. Honorable Chair on the dais, my learned panel members, and distinguished delegates. By now, we have come to a conclusion that we cannot dwell in the environment where we are as far as the mobility is concerned in India. We need to have a clean mobility transformation, and the driver would be the electric vehicle or electric motor. Now, if we look around from a different perspective, from the energy scenario, it is undoubtedly that it will be a cleaner, greener solution. But apart from that, there are a host of other benefits. See, if you look around the power scenario in the country today, we are having a per capita consumption of around roughly 1100 kilowatt hour, which is about 1/10 of that of USA, 1/3 of that of China. Now, this will obviously, government's initiative is to increase the per capita consumption, and this transformation will increase that. What will happen? Today we anticipate that if we convert 100% to the electric mobility, the demand would be rising by about 30,000 megawatt peak. The current stressed asset in the country today, you know that many of the power plants are gone into the NCLT because of the lack of demand. So India is one of the countries where we have surplus capacity of power available for this challenge, taking up the transformation of the energy from the fossil fuel to this power generation. Now people may question that is power generation is clean? No, it is not clean, but it is at least 1/3 cleaner than the per kilometer CO2 being emitted by fossil fuel run or internal combustion engine run vehicles. See, the normal emission rate of carbon dioxide for a even fossil fuel or coal-fired power station is roughly about 0.9 kg per unit or kilowatt hour. See, the conversion rate or per unit standard electric vehicle or bus of larger sizes goes to around 2 kilometers. So per kilometer it comes to around, it is coming to around 0.5, something like that, 0.4, 0.5. And even with stage 6 fuel, the emission rate of CO2 per kilometer is nowhere less than 1.5. So you can see what kind of benefit if we really transform into the electric mobility sector. The other thing is that when you sleep, your car is being charged. So the night demand picks up. In energy sector, this is a problem where the night demand and the morning peak, there is a seesaw. There is a sinusoidal curve. So the night demand picks up, the load factor picks up, the energy generation efficiency picks up. And that ultimately culminates into higher efficiency, lower CO2 generation, and lower fuel consumption. So there are multiple benefits if we have the energy charging also, energy demand and charge and time of the day tariff, where we can give benefit to the night charging. Yes, there are challenges. There are of course challenges that why can't we, what is available today, 150 kilometer odd per charge, why can't it be 1,000 kilometer or something like that? Why do we require a 6 hours or 7 hours charging per charge? Why can't it be like, gassing in a fuel station 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? So there are challenges, but I believe that we can work on this to find out a solution, and I hope that the world is moving towards that, and a day will come when we come up with these challenges. Now, electricity distribution is being franchised. Why not? We were discussing before that, why not sectorially we have a comprehensive transport mechanism, be it vehicle, be it rail, be it metro, whatever, so that we can get the maximum benefit out of it. Multimodal transport system, anything we can do comprehensively to find out a solution. We have to move to make our planet greener. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we'll do next is go rapid fire with each of the panelists, and hopefully we'll try to reserve some time for Q&A with the audience. So I'll come to you, Rohit, first. A decade ago, the Segway was held out as a model of future personal mobility. Perhaps we were ignoring something that was standing right before us, the bicycle electrified as an e-bike. What would it take to actually put the e-bike as an aspirational future personal mobility solution in a country like India?
Actually, except for the last two words which you used, in a country like India, whatever you said for e-bikes is true across the globe. It is an aspirational bike. People really love to do that. People like to flaunt an e-bike. Anywhere you go to Copenhagen and cities like Denmark, wherever you want to go. Now, the challenge in India is twofold. One is obviously, as a manufacturer, when you are increasing the speed of your cycle, and this is more ethos talking here, from let's say an average 6 km per hour to 25 kilometers per hour, you're really worried about the consumer health and safety. So that's the first part, that how can, as the entire ecosystem, take care of the consumer safety aspect. So that's from a very, very ethical perspective. The second perspective is obviously, we don't have any issues of what my friends in automobile sector has of electric charging infrastructure. We have a battery, we have a cycle, put that battery into the cycle, take out that battery and charge it. So from a manufacturing perspective, there is no impediment. From a usage perspective, there is no impediment as a bike. So I really don't think there is any challenge for us to make e-bike as the preferred choice of personal mobility. The only challenge is to make it really chic, to make it really, really inspiring. So that's what we are trying to do in this country.
Manu, turning to you, we sell, about 23 million two-wheelers in the country every year. By far a very popular travel mode, transport mode, as you also amplified in your comments. One of the hurdles in standing in the way of e-scooters or e-bikes or e-motorcycles coming in has been this concern about infrastructure, availability of charging facilities. What's your company doing? What do you think needs to be done to make sure that e-scooters, e-bikes get a fair chance to supplant the conventional two-wheelers?
So, in my opinion, the biggest impediment to electric growth right now is the affordability portion. Of course, the charging infrastructure does play a big role. If you look at the current, these 23 million bikes, 85% of these bikes are sold to people who are using it for pure commute need. And their ability to afford a solution which is 2 to 2.5 times higher is something which is still a big question mark. They will probably not opt for a solution. They would not be able to get into a mobility solution if the prices were that high. So that remains our number one challenge. Once they have adapted, we also feel that the adaptation within two-wheeler will come urban downwards. 50% of our two-wheelers are sold in urban spaces, I mentioned. So those would be the first ones to get converted. If we are able to provide solutions, innovative solutions, whether be it in the space of financial instruments to kind of help access of electric vehicles in a better way, or it could come with shared services, collaborations. A combination of these two would certainly improve the adaptability of two-wheelers in urban spaces. Then comes the question about the charging infrastructure, where for a personal commute, where the commute is more planned, the big advantage of electric vehicles over petroleum vehicles is that you can charge the asset when it is down. When you're sleeping, your asset is getting charged at your home, which cannot happen today with your petrol vehicles. For you to have a fuel for petrol, you will have to go to a petrol bunk. That advantage will come into play for the electric vehicles. However, the anxiety of having the access of the charging point across the city will certainly remain. So that would need a lot of public infrastructure investments.
Nandini, turning to you, without a doubt, Uber has been a bit of a breakthrough in mobility services over the last decade. You've found ways to mobilize capital, orchestrate mobility, stakeholders and participants, leverage technology. There's been a lot of remarkable things that Uber's done. But equally around the world, there have been a number of challenges as to when you look at scaling up, how will this be sustainable? Sustainable economically as well as environmentally. So there have been cities who have been concerned about equity, ease of access to all of its citizens, labor laws, And even this whole idea of can anybody other than Uber sustain the kind of losses before they can actually make a sustainable business practice. But yet Dara Khosrowshahi has really said Uber wants to be in cities, they want to be a part of the mobility architecture. What will it take for Uber to overcome the challenges that have plagued Uber around the world?
So I think you obviously mentioned the challenges, and they have been in parts prevalent in different kind of developed economies, and the way we've grown. We've obviously learned a lot from that. And that's where you will see a lot about 2-3 things. First, we continue to focus on reducing private car ownership. That is our primary mission, and we continue to do that, and that's what all the cities want, right? That's what we hear we have heard across all the panels. Second is around offering multiple modes. The multiple modes actually, I'll go back to the same point, it is a lot more affordable. Once you have more options, it makes affordability and accessibility and equity that you spoke about, right? And third, I think as we talk about the future of mobility, right, it is going to be shared, electric, and connected. Shared, we are actually living it right now, and we're seeing the benefits of it. Electric and connected, we know there are huge benefits, and we are having a constructive discussion of what needs to happen. And as Uber plays a role in proving out the other 2 pieces as well over the coming years, I think we'll get a lot of collaboration and excitement around what Uber can truly do to transform mobility in the world.
Sunil, as you said, the 600-pound gorilla in mobility in India is railways. We've got a huge number of cities expanding. We've got investments practically in every large city for metro rail. And yet, it seems like we've had either a very expensive solution that has limited opportunity for deployment because of capital costs, or we've really struggled with bridging the gap between buses and high-density mobility. Now, around the world, there are a lot of experiments with light rail, with bus rapid transit that literally crosses the border into being very light rail. What are the options that railways can play with in terms of being participating in a fuller spectrum of high-density mobility in India?
As I mentioned, Indian Railways now basically so far has been catering to long-distance passengers and long-distance freight traffic also. But there is certainly now a need for some kind of integration between the, not just the railways, but between all the transport modes in any particular city, where you can, where a passenger has an absolutely seamless experience. He can get out of his home, get into a bus or something like that, reach the station, travel wherever he does. Unfortunately, perhaps we work in sort of isolation. For example, the Indian Railways is so busy running its own services and its own making sure that whatever they're doing, that they can do as well as possible, that the business of transportation of people within the city and outside the railway premises has been left to the road network or maybe the state government to do. So at present, what we do have is that we've got metro rails coming up. We know Delhi. We know there is a metro rail system now operational partly in Lucknow. There is another one coming up in Nagpur, in Pune, in Mumbai itself. And while these don't actually fall under the Ministry of Railways, they fall under the Ministry of Urban Development or at the state government. There is some kind of coordination going on between them to make sure that they cover different areas. They don't go into the same areas. There is also an attempt to go in for coordination with the state transport authorities so that they can provide this last mile connectivity. In Delhi, we keep talking of the ring railway, but one of the problems with the ring railway is that when you get off at a station, say Chanakyapuri or something, you don't know where to go after that because the railway has dropped you at the station, but there is no way to get out of Chanakyapuri or go anywhere. So there is some effort going on, but I personally speaking, I think a lot more needs to be done. We need to have an agency which can coordinate all this and come up with a solution which we have in, say, the Western countries. I mean, you buy one ticket and you can travel on rail and road and bus and whatever it is, and that sort of thing needs to be done.
Sudipta, turning to you, as a developing economy, India is an example of a country where there's a lot of investment in renewables. So there is hope that as renewables become a larger fraction of our total grid, it makes a lot more sense to promote electric mobility. But people in the business and certainly automakers and users point to a challenge in terms of completing the chain, the link between power producers, the distribution companies, the infrastructure owners and operators, and perhaps even fundamental policies about how, it's nice to talk about dynamic charging in the night, but unless there is going to be flexibility in pricing and allowance of, flexible price mechanisms in serving or selling energy, a lot of these promises are not going to happen. So from the power sector and the energy sector, how do you see India going about solving these issues?
See, the greatest challenge for today is supposed to be in the charging side of it. The problem of EV charging is the frequency between the charge or the need between the charge and the time of charging. That means even with DC charging, it takes around about an hour. But if you go to a fueling station, it takes 5 minutes. So a community charging stations will require a lot of parking spaces because a car has to come, even for fast charging, it takes 45 minutes minimum. So this is an area where we need to work upon. And also nowadays, the mobility is around 150 kilometer odd. People say 150, in a congested area it is 120, 100 kilometer. So why can't we expand this horizon? So storage area, batteries, a lot of work need to be done here, number one. Number two, regarding time of the day metering, yes, there are scopes. Nowadays most of the cities, smart cities do have time of the day metering. So we can figure out that what is the quantum being utilized for EV charging so that we can give incentive. This again comes to a policy formation where the incentive directly goes to the user. So to my mind, that things are going in the right direction. There are problems with the charging. They say that the car makers are not going in as promised. And the car makers say there is not enough charging stations available. China, we have more than 130,000 charging stations. In India, still today, we have hardly crossed, probably not crossed even 1,000. Say a country like Germany is having around 30,000 charging stations. So my feeling is that now we are zeroed in that the conversion will take place. So infrastructure has to be done. Government is really working on this. We need to work together, private-public partnership. If State Bank can declare that 2030 they will have EV 100, why can't others? So we need to work on, and definitely a day will come when we have this synchronization of power generation down below. Even the charging stations, nowadays they have been told as a virtual power stations. When they are charging, they will take power from grid. When they are not charging, they can push back power to the grid. So there are a lot of opportunities, even considering the energy sector per se. EV and energy, they are going line side by side. So things are very positive to my mind.
We'd like to use the opportunity to turn this over to the audience for questions. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. I will identify you. Please announce yourself, the question you would like to ask, the person you would like to ask the question to, and please be specific and brief. Others would like to ask questions as well. Yes, sir.
My name is Dr. Shiv Dubey. I am from TERI. Okay. I have a question for Nandini Maheshwari. If you consider to remove spike charges, I will remove my car.
The surge. Okay.
Because that is very much unplanned expenditure a customer has to bear. So if you consider even for some
So if you can remove surge pricing.
I got the question.
Go ahead.
surge pricing,
Yeah, I think the answer is, again, going back to the similar theme I was talking about. If there is surge on the car, you'll be able to actually use public transit or cycle or two-wheeler or other options. That's one of the reasons why the multimodal platform will work. And if you really need to use the car, even if it's surging and even if it's raining, that will still be your choice. So giving you more options will make it easier for you to decide what works at that point in time. That would be my brief answer on that.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Mike will get to you in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm Professor Anil Srivastava, Chairman, North Eastern Chamber of Commerce Industry. You talk a lot about the railways, but railway services are differ from state to state. UP, Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, no time, always going late. And the train is very dirty. I share my experience recently. I was full travel to by Humsafar from Delhi to Gorakhpur. Full train was AC, but it was horrible. The cockroach and mouse were running. Taps were broken. Again, second experience, I went to Gothi to Dimapur. I had a guest from London. So next time they said, we flew from Gothi to Kolkata, Kolkata to London. First class AC rate is 1,500 rupees. You paid 6,500 for airfare. So you're what to say about this?
Let me first of all say I'm sorry that you found a very dirty coach and whatever it was.
Not the whole train, but dirty. I traveled every coach.
So it shouldn't have happened.
Okay, yeah.
You spoke about services in UP and Bihar and everything. You know what has happened in the railways is that over a period of time, we've developed a lot of capacity. As I mentioned, we've gone up from some 50,000 to 70,000, 67,000 kilometers and so on and so forth. But the increase in infrastructure has simply not been able to keep up with the increase in the population and the demand. Because we are so highly subsidized and we are cheaper than any other mode of transport in, say, road transport, either because there is no network or because we are cheaper, there is continuous and constant demand for more and more services. So yes, there is an apprehension. Many people feel that UP has been left out or Bihar has been left out, but actually if you look at the total numbers of trains introduced or new services provided, new tracks provided, I don't think there is any state which has got less or more. Everyone has got whatever, I mean whatever based on the demand, you have to do some prioritization, and people have, development has taken place. As far as the pricing is concerned, pricing still remains in Indian Railways. We are still by far the cheapest. We are subsidizing passenger traffic to the tune of some 31,000 crores in 2018-19. So actually, our fares haven't gone up since 1999. And whereas there could be those cases where there is something called flexi fare scheme, where prices depend on certain trains introduced on certain trains, where the price of the ticket depends on the availability. It goes up and down. It's done through a computer model. We are still much cheaper than everyone. We are still much cheaper than everywhere else. But anyway, services, yes, certainly there is scope for improvement. But I think if you travel on Indian Railways now or in the next 1 year, you will see a definite change in and improvement.
Yes, sir. Right in front.
This is a question to Nandini. If you have Uber buses with shared seating, I'll give up my car.
We already just launched it in Egypt, and we are working and evaluating it in India. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Second row here. I'm sorry.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to know, since we don't have much good enough cycle tracks, they're not safe also. So how do you plan to take your cycles and the cycle campaign further?
I think it's a challenge. It's a classical category where there is enough latent demand but the infrastructure is not there. And that's what exactly I'm doing here, coming to forums like this and representing to governments to create that infrastructure, but at the same time, going to the government and making a presentation where we actually go with CapEx saying that we are ready to put 50% of the money to create that infrastructure. So it's not only talk, but also putting resources behind creating those infrastructures.
I was hoping my flight would be delayed, but it isn't. I'm going to run out of here, but I've got a colleague who's very graciously agreed to keep the session going. Thank you very much, please.
Thanks very much. So we'll carry on with the discussion because we've got some good questions coming. And we can keep going a bit while we wait for our special guest, the Minister, to arrive. So yes, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm Megha from TERI. And I find electric bicycles to be...
Hold the mic close to your mouth, please.
Sure. I find electric bicycles to be a very, very interesting vehicle segment. So I would really like to understand from Mr. Gothi, Ms. Maheshwari, and Mr. Saxena as to how do they see the future of electric bicycles, especially in Indian cities? And what role would they play?
Who wants to take that one? Electric bikes.
So, I mean, world over, electric bicycles actually now are close to 7 to 10% of the total bicycle industry, depending on which country or which city you're talking about. In some cities or countries, actually, it has gone up to 30%. So it's a natural transition which will happen from bicycles to e-bicycles, because the biggest benefit you get is that at any age, if you want to ride a bicycle, it assists you. So the effort taken to reach from a point A to point B reduces by 30% to 60%. You can actually climb the hill. You can take your family along if it's like a two people vehicle. So there are many more use cases and benefits of an e-bike. India, I can talk about what we are doing as Hero Cycles. We have just launched a e-bike around 3 months back in a few cities. We are experimenting it. And I think Manu made a point, is the whole question of affordability, because the moment you put the electrical cells and batteries into it, the bicycle's cost goes up. Unfortunately for us, which is a bicycle, we don't have any subsidy for E, though we are there in E, but the government does not recognize us at this point of time in FAME 1 at least. There is something called electric bicycles. We are hopeful in FAME 2 there would be subsidy for whatever batteries which we are currently, or the cells which we are importing. And once that happens, the bicycle or the e-bikes will become definitely far more affordable. So a very simple answer to your question is, in 5 years at least, I can talk about my numbers, we see at least 15 to 20% of conversion happening to e-bikes, provided all the vectors or all the things are, infrastructure is taken care of.
I think
I'll just go ahead.
Briefly add, obviously, like we're all waiting to see that adoption at the consumer level, and I think especially from a ride-sharing and Uber point of view, it's going to be a very valuable segment for the short distance, few kilometers, and I think that's one of the huge use cases for us to complement the public transit. I mean, we have just recently partnered with Delhi Metro Rail Corporation with Uber to make sure we are serving first mile and last mile. Right now, we are already seeing a huge number of adoption for our motor vehicle product versus the cars. Because that's where the right price segment is, that's where the affordability is, that's where they've already covered most of the distance by metro. They just need to get to the last mile very quickly. And I think electric bikes can have a huge role there. And I think overall, in the spirit of the overall objectives of reducing congestion and giving options, I think two-wheeler is an area that we just need to focus a lot more to push mobility forward.
Thank you very much. We've got 2 questions. Let's do the gentleman here and then the lady at the back. So we've got a mic for this gentleman here.
Mr. Sunil Mathur, I have got my own experience on daily commuting between Faridabad and Palwal. Almost every day, this train takes more than double time. If running time is 60 minutes, it takes more than 120 minutes. And we have more than 300 sunny days. Hardly few days are foggy. But still they cancel train in retrospect way every year without any reason. So why not to take care of this problem? It's every year something is happening. So it's why not to take solutions?
First I thought it's an Uber.
I really feel that it's a very really awful for passengers that
Yes,
the
I'm
train
on
gets
LinkedIn, but
cancelled
not
or
very
it is
much.
taking.
That's
it is losing
yes,
punctuality.
that's
But
why,
the fact
that's
is,
R,
you know, as I
that's
mentioned
I, not
earlier,
A.
this capacity constraint is so huge on our system that somewhere along the line you have to prioritize what will run first. Our freight traffic is also going up, our passenger traffic is continuously increasing. Meanwhile, in the past, what had also happened was that there was a lot of no time was available for maintenance purposes also, and maintenance was suffering, and we had some accidents 2 years back or 3 years back and so on and so forth. So a lot of effort has been put in to get the blocks required for maintenance purposes to make the system safer. In fact, we had a session on railway safety also, I believe, yesterday. So that is one reason why punctuality has been bad in the last 2 years. But now you will find, and our data at least suggests that punctuality is improving considerably. So it is a little unfortunate. There is a terminal constraint at stations. There is a capacity constraint on the tracks. And I think we are doing whatever as much as possible to make sure that the number of cases of punctuality loss reduce.
Why not prioritize local trains? Because they are daily commuting.
Yeah, but you see, this is again a very slightly ticklish thing. You are talking of prioritizing local passengers point of view. But then the long distance passenger who's coming from somewhere also says that I've been traveling for now 16 hours and 18 hours, and just before I reach Delhi, you've stopped me because you've run a suburban train ahead. So there is some kind of prioritization in the sense that suburban traffic during the peak hours gets priority. But long distance also just can't be ignored totally, because that's a separate clientele altogether, separate demands altogether.
Okay, we have one question, lady at the back.
Good evening. My name is Mehak Arora and I'm a student of TERI SAS. So since we discussed a lot about e-mobility, my question is that is it actually an eco-friendly solution, since India is still dependent on fossil fuels for creating electricity rather than renewables? So in turn, it will lead to pollution rather than minimizing it. It's an open question, like a generic question open to the panel.
Who wants to take that?
Mr. I think Mr.
Going electric when you've got a fossil fuel energy source.
Thank you.
Yes, you are correct to that extent that in power generation also there is some kind of emission. Now the energy mix, if you look around the country today, the energy mix says around 60% dependence on the coal-fired stations. Yes, coal-fired is a polluting where carbon dioxide and SOx, NOx, etc. are being generated. But today we have around, the mix says that around 25 to 26% dependence on renewables. And with the target of 2022, 175 gigawatt and then 350 gigawatt in 2030, this mix is supposed to be changing. Now, the more the mix changes, more benefit towards the pollution abatement as far as conversion to e-mobility. In other sense, I told that the per kilometer carbon dioxide emission for electric vehicle is much lesser than that of being generated at the power station. So in any case, it is always beneficial. Furthermore, it will get more benefit when we convert more onto renewables. The percentage will go in favor of the renewables.
Very good. We had a question at the front. Dr. Ghosh. Do we have a microphone?
You mentioned about the lack of investment in infrastructure, rolling stock, and so on. And you have 24 million passengers embarking every day. Now you are spending 100,000 crores on one railway line, which will cater to a few thousand passengers a day. Don't you think this is a misallocation of resources? You may, of course, if you wish, refuse to answer this question.
The only answer that I can give to this question is that this money is not coming from the resources which we would have spent on other infrastructure projects. This is coming from a very, I know the project you're talking of, this is coming from a very soft loan from the Japanese government. It's a government loan, and it wouldn't have come to us for any other project. It has come only for a specific project, that is why. So it is not as if spending money on that particular project is going to take away our resources from any other infrastructure work.
Okay. We're going to close it there because it's time to move on to our next session. So thanks very much for keeping the discussion going. It's been really interesting. And please join me in thanking the panel.